So I've been trying to build a Righteous Fire character with using Wurm's Molt and a flask with Leech on it. And right now I'm level 78. I'll just quickly go over how I leveled. I leveled using Poisonous Concoction, and these were my 6 links. It just looks like this. There's 9 projectiles and they all overlap. So potentially the enemy can take 9 times the damage, so that's really strong. And it's really nice for leveling because you don't need a weapon, so you can focus on leveling and not gearing up. So yeah, this was my gear, pretty much all uniques. To maximize the leech rate from Wurm's Molt, I really wanted to get Valpact involved in the build, but of course Valpact gives you no life regen, and almost every Righteous Fire build has life regen. It's one of the core aspects of the build. But to be, I guess, to be interesting and to really maximize Wurm's Molt, I wanted to get Valpact working, and so my idea was to cast Forbidden Rite every 4 seconds using a trigger weapon like this with a 4-second cooldown. And I talked in the last video about how Leech can last up to 5 seconds by default. So if Forbidden Rite, I cast Forbidden Rite and I take damage and I leech off that, and if that lasts 5 seconds and that is casted every 4 seconds, then I can be permanently leeching and self-sustaining without hitting any enemies or whatever. But it doesn't work because, okay, I'll show you. So right now I'm at 75% Chaos Res, and if I use Flammability, and if I use Flammability, Forbidden Rite will trigger because of this weapon. And I do that, I take damage and I leech, and I see how the energy shield went down pretty quickly. So since I'm using Immortal Ambition, once I get to full life, I start leeching energy shield. But the leech ends really, really fast, and this is actually ending at about 1.5 seconds, and it doesn't last the full 5 seconds that I was hoping. And the reason is that, so Forbidden Rite, I take 40% of maximum life as chaos damage, and 40% is divided by 4 because of my 75% chaos res. So I take 10% of my life, and I leech 15% of that, but since I have about 100% flask effect, I leech 30% of the 10% of damage taken. So I'm actually leeching about 3% of my life every time I cast Forbidden Rite, and 3% is not enough. 3% actually lasts 1.5 seconds. You just have to divide it by 2. So 3 divided by 2 is 1.5 seconds. And if I wanted the leech to last the full, for at least 4 seconds, 4 to 5 seconds, I'll need to take 3 times the amount of damage. So my chaos res actually has to be, instead of 75, it has to be about 25%. If it's 25%, then I will take 30% damage. 30% of my life is damage, and I'll leech about 9% of my life, and that will last about 4.5 seconds. So that works, but it's really clunky because I have to cast a spell every 4.5 seconds, or 4 to 4.5 seconds. Otherwise, the Righteous Fire will just kill me. But it's a cool concept because I'm just purely relying on Leech and no life regen, but it doesn't really work too well because it's just clunky. Instead of taking one huge hit from Forbidden Right every 4 seconds, I thought about taking more frequent hits. And I explored various options of how to take hits like every 1 second or so. And I thought that might work, but I couldn't find a good way to automate it without changing the build significantly. The third variant of Righteous Fire that I considered, and it's the build that I'm playing now, is to combine Leech and Regen. So right now I'm not taking Valpact. So I actually have some regen. If I use all my flasks, I'm regening 454 life per second. And that's not much, but it's enough to get Righteous Fire sustaining. And when I get hit, I'll leech based on the hit using the Wurm's Molt and this flask. So it's like I have just enough regen to sustain Righteous Fire, but when I get hit, I'm relying on Leech to recover back that life that I lost. The build is very far from complete. Obviously, there's a lot of sockets that are empty. It's not at a stage where you should be copying my build. My tree looks like this. I took flask nodes, more flasks, and Immortal Ambition is really important because it lets me leech at full life. When I get hit, when I'm at full life, I still leech back the life I lost. I have a Cluster Jewel here, and some X res. On my amulet, I have 25% increased maximum total life recovery per second from Life Leech. So that means I can leech up to 25% of my life per second. It's 20 times 1.25 is 25. And also on my Wurm's Molt, I have almost 1200 increased total recovery per second from Life Leech. And it's important that this number is as high as possible. If I have 1200, then that means from one hit, I can recover up to 26% of my life per second. But the 26 is limited by my maximum total life recovery per second from Leech. So basically, when I get hit, I'm going to recover 25% of my life per second. It's also multiplied by life recovery rate from this Watcher's Eye by 15%. I also don't hear a lot of people talk about Anathema. I think this ring is underrated. It gives me +2 additional curses for this build, and that lets me curse enemies with elemental weakness and flammability and also punishment. Most people don't use punishment, maybe because it doesn't come up in POB, but it's very strong and it does work for Righteous Fire. So this one, enemies take 64% of increased damage while on low life. And also Debilitate is, it's also quite strong. Debilitate makes enemies have 20% less movement speed and deal 10% less damage. I'll just quickly go over gems and gear. The rest of my gear is pretty straightforward, but it's not going to be permanent. I plan to change most of my gear. I'm wearing Skin of Lords, but not even using it right now. And Progenesis is really nice, but obviously it's pretty expensive. I'll give you another update soon when I'm ready.